Plagiarism. It's easy to avoid, really. So, what is plagiarism? Plagiarism, according to the Quick Access brief by Troika and Hesse, is using someone else's words or ideas in your writing without giving credit. Plagiarism means you are stealing someone else's words. It's a form of academic dishonesty or cheating. It's a serious offense that can be grounds for failing in college. It can be grounds for expulsion from college. And in the business world, it can get you fired or prosecuted. It hurts your credibility, it hurts your reputations. But primarily, you hurt yourself when you're plagiarizing. When you plagiarize, you're really not learning. I had a friend in graduate school who had a side business writing papers for people. And he prided himself on getting a good grade in all of the classes that he wrote papers for. But the thing that his customers never recognized was that he was getting the education and they were paying for it. So, when are you plagiarizing? You're plagiarizing if you buy or copy a paper from the internet. Sometimes there are places where you can buy papers. Sometimes there are places that show you samples of papers. That's plagiarism. It's also plagiarism if you buy or copy a paper from another student or a writer or any other source. It's particularly evil if you borrow a paper from another student asking for a sample of what went well and then you use the paper. Because sometimes your instructors, I don't know, mysteriously have ways of finding out, and you run the risk of failure or expulsion. You're plagiarizing if you turn in any paper that someone else has written, whether the person gave it to you, whether you've downloaded it from the internet, or you've copied it from another source. If you change selected parts of an existing paper and claim the paper as your own. One semester I had, as an example of the last point and this point, two students, and one student asked the other student to see what she had submitted for her paper. And then he sort of shuffled the paper, moving paragraphs and changing some of the illustrations. But it was, honestly, this guy didn't deserve to pass because she was in the same class as he was, and I just read her paper. So the likelihood of him not getting caught was slim and none. But the awful part was that she was called into question, and she could have been failed for that paper and the semester because plagiarism goes both ways. It happens if you are the original writer and you give your paper to someone else, or if you're the person who actually uses someone else's paper. If you neglect to put quotation marks around words that you quoted directly from a source, even if you list the source in your works cited or reference page, you're plagiarizing. If you type or paste into your paper any keywords, phrases, sentences, or longer passages from another source without using documentation to tell precisely where that material came from, you're plagiarizing. If you use words or reasoning from a source without directly citing and documenting that source, even if you put the ideas into your own words, you're plagiarizing. Plagiarizing is taking the words and the ideas without acknowledging the source. If you combine ideas from many sources and pass them off as your own without correctly citing and documenting the sources, plagiarism. If you use photographs, charts, figures, or other visual images from anyone, colleagues, organizations, websites, and so on, without crediting and documenting them, plagiarism. So there are some key ways to avoid plagiarism. The first is never copy material directly from a source. When we send you to the databases, you can send a copy of the document directly to yourself. You can print it. You can copy and paste. And for backup, that's a good idea. But after you read the document, it makes sense to put it into your own words. Never copy material directly from a source unless you plan to use it as a direct quotation. And if you plan to use it as a direct quotation, maybe you want to mark it as such. I'll talk about that a little bit in a few seconds. Become familiar with the documentation style your instructor requires you to use. For this class, you're using the APA style. For other classes, you may be using the MLA style. Immediately, when you expect to quote, paraphrase, or summarize from a source in your document, include the appropriate in-text citation and add your source to your works cited page if you're using MLA, or reference page if you're using the APA style. Don't wait to do this later. Use a consistent note-taking system. Use different colors or some other coding system to distinguish 3 types of materials: direct quotations, materials you've summarized or paraphrased from a source, your own thoughts triggered by what you've read. So maybe quotations are yellow, summaries are blue, paraphrases are green, and your own thoughts triggered by what you've read, purple. When you edit and proofread, look for any places you might have overlooked that need documentation. You can avoid plagiarism, and it just makes sense to do so, because especially if your instructor is likely to be on the ball and looking, or using a software like Turnitin, you're just running a terrible risk. So don't do that, and don't plagiarize. Thanks.